Welcome everyone to today's webinar, a collaboration between Bond Brand Loyalty and the Wise Marketer. I'm Bill Hannafin, the CEO of the Wise Marketer Group, and I'm excited to host today's conversation centered on the latest body of research produced by Bond Brand Loyalty, entitled the Loyalty Report 2019. The Loyalty Report 2019 is produced by Bond in collaboration with Visa, and it's the longest standing and largest study of its type. Global in nature, the research sampled over 55,000 consumers and examined over 900 programs across more than 20 global markets. The scope and depth of this, as you can see, are key reasons why it's quickly become the standard, quoted often in the mainstream press, and relied upon by brands for strategic insights. Today's webinar is titled, The New Story of Loyalty, Remaster, Renew, and Reimagine Your Program. And the title itself was inspired by the findings from the Loyalty Report 2019. Our presenters today from Bond are Sean Klassen and Scott Robinson. I'll introduce each of them in just a moment, but wanted to quickly cover some logistics as we get going. Both Sean and Scott have some great material to share with you today, and we realize too that you're going to have your own questions. I'll probably have a few myself. And since our audience is muted, we ask that each one of you would write your questions in the chat window that's available for your use. And our team will moderate those questions during the webinar, and we'll cover some of those as we progress through the material, probably save a few others for the Q&A session towards the end of our hour together. So if for any reason your question is not directly addressed during the webinar, don't worry. We'll collate all these questions after the event today, and we'll respond to those in writing in a written form afterwards. One more thing to look out for, we're going to have a couple of poll questions throughout, so be alert to those when they pop up. You get a chance to vote, and we'll collate some of those results and help to facilitate some discussion, so it should be fun. So I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. I'm going to start with Scott. In his role as Vice President, Design and Strategy, Scott Robinson leads Bond Brand Loyalty's consulting and solutions discipline and is Bond's principal thought leader for consumer loyalty strategy engagements. He focuses on enabling clients with the best possible solutions for their specific objectives and environments, and ensures that Bond maintains market leadership in terms of loyalty and CRM innovation, technique, and approach. Scott has over 10 years experience designing, implementing, and optimizing large-scale loyalty and CRM programs, and helps clients understand how to use them as stepping stones for inspiring powerful relationships with their customers. He brings strong experience across a number of industries, including consumer retail and financial services. And interestingly, he has a very highly disciplined analytics approach that he blends in to build strategy for his clients. Scott is frequently called upon to comment in the media. You've probably seen and read some of his material out there. He's a frequent speaker at industry events, including Loyalty 360, E-Tail, CMO Exchange, the CMA, and the AMA. And who knows, we might even get him to speak at the next Loyalty Academy conference in 2020. We'll see about that. Scott also holds an MBA from the Richard Ivey School of Business at the University of Western Ontario. Scott's going to be joined today by Sean Klassen, who's Bond's Executive Vice President of Strategy and Innovation. And I really love this about Sean. He talks about how after years of living in, quote, ad land, that he had had enough of the F words, the fleeting, frivolous, and fun work that he was doing. It was all good, but he really wanted to focus on work that would deliver measurable results for his clients. So he found his way into this loyalty business, and with Bond, he joined them in 2008, and over the years, he's been instrumental in creating solutions for big brands like Under Armour, New Balance, Sephora, Aveda, Ford, Harley-Davidson, and the UFC. Sean brings relentless curiosity to his work. He's always asking why when trying to solve for a solution, and his approach really represents a coalescence of creativity and analytics as he evolves a traditional strategy role to mesh finance and data, the visual acumen, and design thinking. His experience spans financial services, manufacturing, retail, hospitality. He too is a regular speaker and frequent industry commentator at conferences all around. Writes for publications around the world, and he brings insights and entertainment to just about any topic that he participates in. He's a natural born leader, He's fun to be around, electric, I would say. He's full of energy. So, you know what, with that, I am super energized to get this started, and I'd like to turn it over to Sean. He's going to get us kicked off in today's webinar.
Bill, that was a mouthful. I realized that we definitely need to shorten those bios. I appreciate the introduction. Scott and I are really looking forward to today's discussion. I now will hopefully live up to the electric billing that you gave us up front. One of the things we wanted to do by way of introduction is just maybe ground this conversation in where, you know, we as a collection of people who live and work at Bond see the world and why we do this work. It is born of some of what you teed up. We believe that there is great potential when human beings feel more bonded to the businesses that they adopt into their lives or the businesses that they represent. But what we know about building those bonds is that it is the experiences themselves that really do that work. And so we're about to have a great big conversation on loyalty. For us, to some degree, brand loyalty has always been, but experience, managing that experience, measuring that experience, marketing that experience is probably the means to that. We are blessed to work for a lot of great brands, to represent some of the world's kind of most beloved brands, most valuable brands, and we don't take that charge lightly. They've done a lot of work to build out who they are and how they operate, and I think, you know, we try to do tribute to that in their loyalty program design and the experiences that we create for consumers, their employees, and their channels all the way through. One of the things that we would table up front is the degree to which you know, it takes a set of services and offerings to market the experiences that brands are building for their customers, to then properly measure and see all of the ways in which it is or is not paying back for the brand, and to manage it at literally every turn. Make sure that from the design through to how the channel interfaces as your most dominant interface to customers, often in the retail world, making sure that we're managing every part of that experience. So there's a couple of combinations that are born of kind of the Bond brand, if you will. One is that combination of, you know, insights as well as the imagination that we put into that from the experiences we all bring to the table. That is in designing and building and operating those experiences for all the constituents that are part of making that brand promise true. And then I think you'll hear today, and you'll see some data and some evidence that we have been collecting and more sort of deliberately making sure that we can bring to audiences like this about the return that each of these things have. And so there are topics that many of us are familiar with around personalization and gamification, and I think inevitably the questions that come out of a lot of that work is, yes, I get it, I understand, I'm on that philosophical train, but how much do I spend on it, and what can it produce for me? So Scott and I are going to share some of this data with you. As Bill mentioned, please throw questions into the chat window whenever you need.
Terrific. This is Scott. Let me take a moment just to introduce you to the star of today's discussion, which is this body of work, which we've undertaken many years in a row. So this year's 2019 version of the Loyalty Report is its 9th year. It is a global study. It is the largest study of its kind. It spans some 900 different programs. We captured feedback from over 5,000 consumers in the programs that you all operate. One of the things about this study is that it's global in reach, and so increasingly with clients who are going global, with interested parties who are interested in taking their programs global, a tool like this has been terrifically informative to help understand what are the nuances on a market-by-market basis, what do consumers say about the engagement initiatives they participate in other markets, how to get those things right as we're expanding. Interestingly, this is a tool that gets better with time, and so a single point of time would be terrific. That we've had this work in field gathering information for 9 years helps strengthen the look back, but also a view to what is changing and what's important going forward. I would say as well, and maybe not for today's discussion, but why this is so terrifically valuable in conversations like this with you and others, is that we can append behavioral data to what is otherwise attitudinal data in this study to have an even more enriched view of what your members are saying with your programs. So enough about the anatomy of the study itself. In the 50 or so minutes that Bill has afforded us to have this dialogue with you today, we've chosen to focus on a small subset of the topics in this year's study, and here they are. In each of these 9 years running, we've had a look at some very important metrics, many of which are likely on your own program and customer engagement scorecard. So we'll show you a view of a handful of trackers that are important to you. Personalization, likely a topic that you all are discussing with your teams internally. And so what's your members' view of personalization and what's our point of view on a path forward? Certainly rewards and redemption likely still comprise a large share of your customer engagement budget. And so what are consumers saying about the initiatives and the rewards that you are serving up to them? So some guidance for you there. And then increasingly, and you'll hear us say this in today's discussion, that the role of a customer engagement initiative is to give your customers a better version of your brand. And so when programs are doing good work to help you extend your brand promise, that's the role of a program. And so we'll take a look at how programs are engaging members, not just at a point in time, let's say at the moment of purchase, but rather across their entire experience with you and beyond. So those are the discussions we've got teed up today. And as Bill mentioned, we certainly would invite your questions and commentary throughout. And if not with us, certainly with others that you know, we would invite you to share out some of the insights, do some screen grabs and share those out. Here we are at Creative On. Here each Sean and I are our handles on Twitter. And certainly you can follow along and other commentary about this body of work or contribute to it through this hashtag loyalty report. Okay, terrific. So topic number one, loyalty experience tracking. And so some of the things that I mentioned are likely adorning your own customer engagement scorecards. We've been keeping an eye on these things and others for some time. And so things like the extent to which your members say good things about you, the extent to which they have propensity to stay longer with your business, spend more as a result of having participated in your initiatives. One of the things that you'll see on here is that all of these tracker metrics, and so actually for the first time ever in the history of this work, all of these important tracker metrics are on the rise. The second thing you'll likely notice that these are terrifically strong numbers. And so loyalty works. The way in which brands are engaging their customers through programs today are having an influence on the behaviors that you are counting on and that the outcomes of the relationships that you have with consumers from undertaking these initiatives. So say, stay, spend. In the bottom corner there, you'll notice that the lion's share of your members view their program experience as a key component of their relationship with your brand. So terrifically strong numbers to affirm the impact and the outcomes of it.
Bill, you teed up, I think, as part of that bio up front, you know, the degree to which other forms of marketing could claim such strength in having influence over the decisions that consumers make. Every time we look at these trackers, I think I'm struck by the degree to which a customer would recognize and sort of cognitively volunteer that they know that it is doing something to drive their retention or their spend with a particular brand. And so that's what gives me a lot of confidence and credence in this work because they tell us.
Right. Now, Scott or Sean, one question that popped up was wondering if the tracker metrics were for B2C or did they also include any B2B programs?
This is predominantly a consumer study, so that 55,000 respondents that we mentioned are consumers of programs, so in a B2B context. In related work, we undertake a curation of operators points of view on all of this work, and as well a handful of B2B information, but this work is consumer.
Great.
One of the things that we get asked is, what is our program competing against? What noise do we have to cut through? What are the other occupants of the proverbial loyalty wallet, or increasingly the space on screen that we need to compete against to engage our customers? One of the things that we've been tracking on this topic over time is the number of quote unquote programs that members are participating in. And so you can see here over the last 5 years or so, that number has grown from about, on average, 13 programs per member to 15 or so. The line below, I would say, is the more important of these two measures, and it is pretty consistent. This is the number of programs in which members are active, meaning having made a purchase, made a redemption. This has been flat at 7 since the dawn of time. One of the things I would say about this is that consumers have an engagement capacity. You know, they don't have the mental bandwidth and/or the financial means to engage in a whole host of brands and programs, and so that members are only active in about half of the programs they're participating in. Isn't a bad thing, but it is something to keep an eye on. When we get asked, like, how do we make sure we turn that into 7, that 7 into 8, or 8 into 9? That's not the right question. It's how do we occupy one of those active spots in your customer's wallet? Loyalty shouldn't and doesn't reward promiscuity. So all of you wouldn't want that number to be 15 of 15.
Yeah.
You would want to make sure that the work you're doing and the initiatives that you're serving up to customers are doing the right work to prevent your customers from engaging, or your competitors from engaging your customers. We keep an eye as well on overall satisfaction over time. This has been fairly consistent, with maybe the exception of a slight decrease. This is still strong, but a slight decrease over last year. And I think what we would say here is that there is continued rising consumer expectations that has this number a little bit under pressure. We keep an eye on this metric across sectors. And so for those of you joining us from retail fuel or grocery, or for those of you joining us from the payment space, you will see your sector average up here in terms of, generally speaking, how engaged or satisfied members and customers in your programs, in your competitor set, are today. One of the things that, Bonvoy, for instance, has since retooled and relaunched, and that entire sector still sort of occupies the bottom of this list, which continues to be a little bit of a surprise for us, for a sector that knows who you are even before you've arrived, or at that first moment of their experiencing with you, in a way that is, although decreasing, in a way that is different in, say, grocery, when your brand or your customer's brand is only engaging at that moment of purchase. We keep an eye on this, as you've heard us say, because this is a global study, the extent to which members in programs on a global basis are engaged. Quite a variety of responses here, and maybe sort of the instructive question is, how should we use this, or what should we take away from this information? One of the things that we know is that Amazon's engagement initiative, Prime, literally ranks atop of the list in all of the markets that they participate in. And this lets us do some interesting things from a benchmarking perspective, and helps us interpret how to guide brands and clients forward into other markets.
This is literally, I think, one of my favorite parts of this story out of this year's data, the degree to which we can create a bit of a yardstick for people to understand that when I take this loyalty value proposition and I put it in another part of the world, how do I temper my expectations around it? So this is probably one of the things that, spoiler alert, I love the most in the study.
Many of you will likely be familiar with Burgernomics, conceived by the economist some couple decades ago, basically as a way to normalize or create a point of comparison for currencies around the world. We've undertaken our own sort of loyalty version of this, which is, how do we interpret these differing global responses, or differing global stat numbers around the world? And we can do this because Prime and its relatively consistent value prop looks and feels the same in each of the markets it competes in, and yet the extent to which it is achieving overall satisfaction differs. And so the fact that Prime is number one in all of those markets lets us say, you know, folks or consumers in this market are more discerning or have higher expectations or are more reserved with their positive comments versus other markets. And so for clients who have programs in many markets and are achieving differing results, we've got terrific benchmarks to help sort of normalize those and say, actually, a 40% overall SAT in this market is very good in comparison to something higher elsewhere because of the extent to which consumers discern customer engagement initiatives globally.
Yeah, that's right.
We get asked a lot, and our study endeavors to answer this question. How do we get higher on the list? How do we better engage consumers? And so in each of the 9 years of the study, we've evaluated, and this has evolved, but we've evaluated some 60 plus different attributes, and everything from rewards and redemptions to relevance and personalization, to make sure that we're giving the right guidance for where to focus first. What are the most important things that matter? What are the important things that do not? How do we compare to our competitor set? All of that to say, though, is that the things that matter most is probably not where you're spending the bulk of your loyalty dollars today, but rather on the other portion of this schema, which is the experience. There is certainly a role for rewards. There is certainly a role for earn and burn mechanics inside programs. Those do good work. But 3/4 of all of the things that are driving your members' engagement with your program and brand relate to the experience.
So Scott, I mean, the thing that you and I have talked about many times with clients over the years is the degree to which there is some disconnect between where we spend dollars in programs and what increasingly consumers are telling us matters to drive their satisfaction with those programs. A lot of the stuff that you would see in pink around this graph would tell you that those are largely one-time costs. Those aren't the kind of costs that continue to ramp and scale with the program as it grows enrollment over time. And so the degree to which there is really attractive return on creating better forms of recognition and support or adding ease and enjoyment, those things tend to be mechanics you install in a one-time capacity that run over the duration of the program, but don't have a material kind of single cost with every point earned or with every day of membership or any of those things. And so that's the rational sort of discussion that we're going to tee up to have on a lot of topics that could otherwise be less grounded in the financials.
Hey, Bill, just before we change gears to our next topic, any questions by our audience or by you, just to make sure we're answering curiosities or things we didn't mention?
Sure, there's one clarification. Person asked if the active membership number was across categories or within categories. So, and the example was if there's 7 active members, is that an apparel alone or is it apparel, grocery?
Yeah,
retail?
thanks, that's terrific. Great question. That is an aggregate across the study. And so for all 15 programs that a participant is in, that is across sector, as is that number 7. And so that is payment programs, that is grocery retail programs, that is fuel retail programs, hospitality, air. And we certainly have all of this data on a sector by sector basis, which we can tee up the anatomy of what that 7 is, or understand the way in which, perhaps the person posing a question wonders how they compare to their competitor set, but that's an aggregate across the study.
Perfect, that's great, thanks.
Thanks for the question.
Topic number 2 in today's discussion relates to personalization, the extent to which brands and programs are customizing and making more relevant the experience that is being teed up to customers and participants. Certainly no topic or no discussion about loyalty today takes place without some discussion around the data that is collected, the way in which it gets used, the extent to which personalization is achieving a better experience for customers. What we thought we would do, just to kick this discussion off with all of you, would be, for those of you operating programs, certainly know some of our friends on the vendor side are joining today. So if you have a point of view, share it, but we're particularly interested in program operators' perspective here. To what extent do you feel your members would say that you're serving up a personalized experience for them in your program? So what you should see in front of you, Bill, if you've launched the poll, what you should see in front of you, everyone, is that question in a pop-up window with 5 different answers from strongly agree to disagree. So we'll give you a quick second just to serve up and answer your question, and then we'll show the results to all of you in a moment.
This is great. The clickers rapidly were on the rise. So just give it a couple seconds, see if it slows down for a minute. We've got more than 50% of people on board voting right now, and now I can share results with you.
Terrific. Thanks, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so presuming the last set of votes that are kind of trailing in now are so drastically different in opinion. I mean, Scott, you and I have seen patterns like this, the degree to which there isn't strong agreement that people are satisfied with the programs that marketers are putting out there. That's not unusual to us.
Yeah, I guess what I would see, and if you can see the results up on screen, it looks to us about a little less than 30% of your members would say they agree. Less than 5 strongly agree, but almost a third agree that you're serving up a personalized experience for your customers. In a moment, we'll show you the members' perspective so we can see a bit of a program operator's point of view counter to what your members are saying. So hold on to this for a moment. I want to just tee us off in terms of a couple examples that have caught our attention on this topic as we look out in the market.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the degree to which personalization comes up in this topic is so frequent, but looking at the world of find incarnations of that experience taking hold in real and kind of material ways. You know, you and I have been struck by the degree to which a brand like Nike, a manufacturer who in some cases retails its own product, in other cases does that through others, is in fact kind of crowdsourcing the locations, the inventory. All of those components are being driven by what loyalty member data is telling them there is interest in. Where should we put the store? What should be on the shelves, et cetera. And I think that is probably one of the most fulsome examples of that coming to market. One of the things that I always want to do is remind ourselves, you know, in this work that we do, and when we get you all on the call today would know, getting the tech stack right, making sure our processes are such that we can personalize, you know, communications out to people, understanding how to measure those things. That's all hard work. But I kind of want to put that in perspective. If any of you have made the pilgrimage to Disney and ended up in Pandora, there is this wonderful little experience called the Avatar Maker. And in the span of about 4 minutes, they will scan your face and you will kind of see that happen and kind of feel what that experience unfolds like. And you'll walk away being told that, you know, somewhere in the span of about 40 minutes, you can come back and get a toy that literally looks like you. And so part of me wants to kind of put in perspective when we're trying to build personalized communications or a lot of the other typical forms that personalization shows up in this conversation. I want to go, I know it's hard, but is it as hard as making tens of thousands of toys that literally look like the individuals they were inspired by? You know, I think that's a decent challenge for us to have in the back of our heads as we go into, can I get all of the message right at the right time in the right moment? You know, I think a lot of it is about utility. There's some novelty in here, and there's a lot of great lessons to learn there.
You brought your avatar home.
I did bring my avatar home.
Recalling a moment ago the poll results that you all shared, this is literally with a group answering the question, the first time that you have all been more critical of your own performance than your members are of you. 1 out of every 5 of your members are very satisfied on a 5-point scale, are very satisfied with the personalization you're serving up to them in their experience with you. Only 3% of you said you would strongly agree. About a quarter of you said you agree. And so you're being
Tough markers.
Yeah. Here's the things that we asked. Like, one of the things we wanted to understand was if only 1 in 5 members are saying there is a level of personalization being experienced, what are the things getting in the way? We first looked at things like, does the data exist? Well, yes, it does. We all know the extent to which our mobiles and other things are producing data about us and about your customers today. We know as well that overwhelmingly customers are saying, yes, please collect more of my data if you'll do more things with it. I'm willing to serve up things about me so that I can have a better experience with your brand. And so one of the things that we look at is it being collected? Is the information about your members being collected? Well, your members would say, for sure, there's some obvious things or some familiars that you all are likely collecting, like first name, like email address. So the majority of members say those things are being collected. There are some less frequent things, but generally speaking, the perception of members, the things that you are all collecting are saying that you're doing so. Here's the thing that should alarm us all, and that is a terrific call to action for those of you collecting this information. Your members are saying you're not using it. So take first and last name, for instance. Only 1 out of every 2 of your members are saying that you're using that information in catering or in personalizing an experience with them. And that same story holds true down all of these different attributes that you're gathering on members. You have the data. Your members aren't perceiving yet that you're using it to personalize their experience.
Yeah, I remember the indictment, that I felt looking at these results to say first name, really only 50% of programs are showing that they're using a piece of data like that. Whereas if you look at the bottom of this list, I mean, almost the same amount of programs are using the goals and intentions that they are having people volunteer, whether it's through wish listing and some of those familiar mechanics. So I think that there is something there that says, there are some basics that are missing that are part of the experience expectations that members are having with the brand.
There's some interesting brands catching our attention. Take Hill City, for instance. If you've not heard of this brand, here's a collection of marketers and apparel designers who said there's a gap in the market on performance apparel. We want to make a new type of apparel that caters to a broader audience. But they're not doubling down on the things they're making. They're doubling down on the ways in which they're engaging their customers and prospective customers. They've overtly said they want to be as one-to-one as humanly possible in the ways in which they engage their customers. And so literally the entire experience beyond the apparel that customers are wearing takes place through this interface. It all feels like a conversation. Hi, Sean. Thanks for inquiring about our stuff. What are your interests, profiles, preferences? And it all feels very much like a conversation between 2 people.
Yeah, I think there's some techniques in there that are worth considering, whether you are actually running kind of a chat channel or doing some version of this through a social mechanism or whatnot. But even in email, I find that there, which we all would know would be quite dominant as a channel in loyalty programs and CRM programs. I think there's a way for it to feel a lot more conversational and a lot more personalized as a result of it. And we know that that will do good work on the P&Ls of the programs that adopt it.
One of the other things that we looked at in the study, and not to say we were leaning too heavily on an old adage, but of all of the things that makes a personalized experience from the perspective of communications, we looked at what's getting in the way from the perspective of the message, or is it something not so personalized? Is it not in the right moment? Is it not in the right channel? And unanimously across all of these attributes that create an effective communication, members just are not feeling it from you. And so only 1/4 of members would say that, yep, you've got me at the right channel or the right place in the right moment. But here's the reason that it's a worthwhile or worthy pursuit. You'll see a handful of numbers across the bottom here. Among members who said you're getting these things right, among members who are saying their experience with you feels personalized, you're getting a lift it is feeling ninefold more personalized on the right channel and sevenfold more personalized on the right place, etc. And so in a moment, we'll have the discussion about the financial impact of personalization, but it is feeling like a worthwhile pursuit.
So here's an example, Scott. You and I always get asked, you know, how many communications in a span of time is too much? And with utility, and that utility breeds relevance, you get a kind of personalized threshold that would allow you as many as 8 messages, 2 transactions in the span of 25 minutes. And so the example that we often point to is something like Uber Eats. I get 4 messages in a row, highly utility based, that I initiated, that tell me my order has been accepted, that the food is ready, that the courier is on the way, etc. All of that is building confidence in me that I am about to receive and my hungry tummy is going to enjoy the food that I ordered. And I think the degree to which those 4 messages come and they follow up now with 4 more to say, how was the service, i.e. Paul's delivery? How was the actual restaurant? How was each item? In there, I might offer Paul a tip. I've done 2 transactions in the span of that 25 minutes. And I think, you know, outside of this context, a lot of people would say, well, that's just too much. 8 minutes, 25 minutes, 8 messages in 25 minutes with 2 transactions, that's impossible. And I think with the right utility that breeds the kind of auto relevance that people recognize as personalization, that this is the bar. Fair
there's
or
a new
unfair.
water level being set. Experiences like this with Uber Eats, with your 8 messages in a short period of time,
are going to inform everything else I expect from the world, fairly or unfairly.
We kept asking other questions about what's getting in the way, and even if brands are collecting the information, even if there's an attempt to use it, some have been guilty of setting it and forgetting it. Understanding your customers for a moment in time and yet not keeping well apprised of how their preferences change, how their interactions with you change. And so overwhelmingly, still only 1/4 of members say that brands are keeping pace with who they are. There's some interesting brands catching our attention. You know, Virgin's Red program, for instance, in the way in which they're creating interesting interfaces to get unique and moment in time inferences on who you are. Accor Hotels caught our attention. This is a webcam-based heart rate monitor that through this terrific interface tries to better understand you so that they can better create an experience for your members on property.
So Scott, this is the classic moment in this discussion that we have always had where people are kind of nodding their heads and wowing at heart rate monitors through webcams and stuff like that. And they're like, I get it. I'm all in on personalization. What you and I think have been starving for, and the study helped to unlock for us this year, is the degree to which we can build the financial story and the economics around how much do I invest in something like personalization. I get it. You're preaching to the converted. I already believe in its truth. Now, how much ends up being the next question?
Perfect segue. You saw it from a moment ago where we teed up that only about 1 in 5 of your members are saying that they feel a very personalized experience in their relationship with you in their program. One of the things that we didn't call your attention to, but was on that screen as well, is when there is a lift in overall satisfaction on personalization, you also get a corresponding lift in the extent to which members will say good things about your brand, the extent to which they will stay longer with your brand, the extent to which they will spend more with your brand. And those lifts range from, you know, 6-fold on say, 5 on stay, 3-fold on spend. Take a scenario and do the math yourself on a scratch pad next to your desk there. If your program had 500,000 members, if each of your members were, say, worth $100 gross profit a year, now we can argue whether you'd get a 3-fold X in spend just from personalization alone.
Sure.
But what we can all likely agree to is that there is a lift. And so, so that we don't argue the number today, take just 1%. You know, if it's going to be 5% lift for you, if it's going to be 10% lift for you, do the math on 1%. in a universe of 500,000 customers or members who are each worth $100, where personalization promises to potentially deliver a very significant lift in spend, what is 1% worth to you? And here in this case, 1% is worth $500,000 of gross profit in a year. And so when we get asked, where do we spend money? How do we spend money best? Where will we drive our best return on our customer engagement investment? We do math like this with our clients to make sure that we hone in on the moments and things that matter most.
I think the degree to which this would be, different from category by category. If you're in a new category that is trying to build new behaviors, then I think it is plausible to say, in my ride sharing activity, can I literally get, a 3.5 times lift out of a, pardon the pun there on lift and ride sharing, on a 3.5 times lift on their spend? You can if you are building brand new behaviors. In other categories where there's kind of more saturation and more maturity, it's going to be tempered. But I think, Scott, your logic holds true that says we now have the tools and the means by which to put some kind of quantification to topics like gamification, topics like personalization.
Yeah, I think where there is a steady state, where a program and an initiative has been in place for some time, you've got some good historicals. I don't mind the example of rideshare because they're hitting their stride and they now have been around for some time, but there are other factors like disrupting a sector, grabbing customers who might not have otherwise trialed them, the early adopters some years ago. And so there are a whole host of factors at play in terms of what drives an increase in spend. But if you were to isolate personalization alone, it's a worthwhile investment. Bill, any questions from you or from the group joining us today on that topic before we move into rewards?
Well, there was one question here, Scott, that I thought was interesting. Since the discussion about personalization has been ongoing for a few years, the person wanted to know if you thought, especially with this math you just showed, that we've reached some kind of tipping point where the investment in personalization to a reasonably granular level can be financially justified by most brands.
Yeah, I think one of the things you teed up as you were introducing me and my history to this group today is I've spent a long and exciting time in customer data analytics that has been a terrific touchstone for all of the strategy and design work I do today. And if you take that, for instance, that work, what I know in getting to an insight that is in the data is that it takes a lot of effort to collect it. It takes a lot of effort to make sure there's good data hygiene. It takes a lot of effort to do analysis on a set of data to get to that one important nugget. And I think the same metaphor holds true in personalization. Brands and organizations have been underway to get the right systems in place to not only collect the data, but to understand what it means and to action it more effectively and more efficiently. And so I think we are hitting our stride. You saw some of the data that we teed up today in terms of what isn't getting in the way is that the data exists. You heard me anecdotally say what isn't getting in the way is consumer permissions for brands to collect that data. In fact, brands have a ton of data, and as many of our audience members will attribute today, they've got more than they know what to do with. And so now that all that heavy lifting has been put in place or been done to get the data in place, now is the time to start actioning, and we've got the tools, the means, and the technology as an industry and as practitioners to do that in a scalable way, effectively and efficiently.
Here's one more point on that. I would say in terms of a tipping point, I think was the language in the question.
Right.
Consumers, I think, have hit a tipping point where they just expect, fairly or unfairly was the language I used earlier, that it's there. And I think the quantification of the investment, I see a lot of brands who they got the tech stack right. They are, able to doing all the right enablement elements to put an email. Let's take a pedestrian example. An email together that should, could, would have all of the right things. And behind the scenes, that email might be one of no more than 4,000 permutations and combinations that were put out that single day by the brand. But it misses a trick to use something like the first name. Hey, Scott, here's an email just for you. Because you X, Y, or Z, we would like to offer you A, B, or C. And I think a lot of brands miss kind of that last couple of feet to get the language right, to get all the credit. So
to claim credit for it.
Yeah, so that the recipient has like stark cognition that this was made for me. Otherwise it shows up and it looks like, hey, 15% off, which I think probably everybody got. We are at a tipping point where those things need to be reconciled.
Be more bold in correcting a misperception that there has been an effort to personalize that experience. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, guys.
One of the topics that we know is important to you, just given the extent to which you invest, or that the extent to which this item is a large one on your program budget, one of the things we'll do is serve up a quick, maybe cautionary tale around the future of rewards and what you should know about it going forward. One of the things that we know across sectors, nearly all members in a program have made a redemption. So 84% of members have made a redemption if they're in your program. And it is doing good work to drive lift. It is doing good work to drive a propensity to say good things, stay longer, spend more. And so that's what that 1.6 is there. The difference between those who have made a redemption and those who maybe are on their way, not yet made a redemption. Here's the thing that we wanted to call your attention to, and this is one of those things in our 9-year history we've been keeping a close eye on, but this efficacy is waning. The extent to which a redeemer is more engaged, stays longer, says better things, etc., is waning. And so at its height in 2015 of a 2-fold X on all of those things, in 2015, we're now down to a little over 1.5 today. I think what we would say, or the culprit we would blame, is this collection of rewards. A toaster is a toaster, is a toaster, is a toaster. And so one of the things, if you're operating a program with rewards, you're likely wondering or looking at the extent to which you're creating a differentiating experience for your members through your reward. And increasingly, the answer is no. And we would also blame this culprit. Consumers today, anywhere on the planet, can get anything their heart desires delivered to their door, probably that afternoon. And so that we all as consumers, to get the things that we all used to curate into rewards catalogs, it is no surprise that the efficacy of those things in driving engagement is waning over time. We would say this might be the hero or the solution going forward.
This is my second favorite slide.
I think we're being a little tongue-in-cheek, but for those of you who are familiar with this brand, you'll know why we served up a pint of beer. For those of you who are not familiar, here's a pub in the UK called the Runaway Pub. It is a component of the experience that the brand New Balance is serving up to its members. And so when its customers, its members run miles, it logs how far they've run, how often, and members not only just earn miles, but they can use those miles run to enjoy a pint of beer with a friend at the end of their workout. And so increasingly it is less about the what and more about the how in doing something socially, giving credit for non-purchase behaviors, giving credit for the ways in which members are engaging with your brands through your products and through your experiences in a way that a toaster just will never do.
Yeah, full disclosure. I mean, I remember when we were setting up for, in the design of a program like this, there was a lot of discussion about those non-monetary behaviors that are very predictive of what will eventually be purchase decisions. And so I think this is kind of a clever way to be able to put all of that knowledge into practice, do it in a way that has kind of some stopping power, pardon the pun there on a running metaphor. It's some ways that people can experience that brand that don't come down to kind of the typical currencies of loyalty, which you and I have spent a lot of time exploring.
Yeah. Bill, others, it's a short discussion, but a large portion of people's program operating budgets. Any quick questions before we spend the last 5 minutes on member engagement mapping?
Just this really, Scott, and a couple people have asked about, wonder if redemption levels are being impacted by the this emphasis on making redemption easier for everyone. Think about spending points like cash at the point of sale. We just wonder what kind of impact that's having on the overall level of responses that you're getting in the research.
Yeah, I think I would interpret that question as maybe a bit more focused on the how than the what. If the what in that question isn't changing and brands and program operators are still inclined to use monetary means of engaging member behavior, I would say the ease, the using it point of sale, the ease is more about the how. And so if there's a reluctance to move away from the non-differentiating what, at least give some firm consideration to the how. And so one of the things that we see overwhelmingly in this body of work is that the how is most important, that 3/4 of all that engages members relates to the experience. And it certainly applies to things like cashback and discounts, which I think is maybe part of your question.
Yeah, that's good for now. Thank you.
Last topic in the few minutes we have left, one of the things that we wanted to look at through this body of work is the role that the program is playing across the members' experience with the brand. Our point of view is that the program should do good work to make sure that the member gets a better version of the brand because they're a member. To take it back to topics like what we just undertook, personalization. When the experience is better because you've raised your hand, informed the brand who you are, what you like, how you want to engage, customers can get a better version of the brand through the program. Maybe a quick poll for our audience members, Bill, if we could. For those of you operating a program today, give us a sense, or give others on the phone a sense, the extent to which your program is structured and has the right mechanics to create a better version of your brand for members. So the question is, or the statement to agree or disagree with is, our program makes our members' experience with our brand better. Give folks a moment just to tee that up.
Yeah, I think the degree to which there was hard marking in the first poll, I'm interested to see if it's going to come back same in the second poll.
There you go. We've got a substantial number of answers here, so we're going to share some results. Can you see that?
Yeah, so we've got a lot more people now who would say that they were strongly agreeing that their program, I think the label on the top of this is wrong, but they were responding to what the program actually creates a better member or a better experience with the brand. How do you read that, Scott? In the somewhat agree kind of as the majority of the case there, but that's a pretty strong agreement.
Yeah, let's answer that by putting it adjacent to what our audience folks members say about their program. 1/3 of your members say they would strongly agree that their experience with your program is giving you a better version of your brand. And so you all are a little more
liberal with the response.
Or 60% of you would say that your program is giving your members a better version of your brand because of program membership. So I guess what we'd say is take a discerning look at the extent to which your program is driving your members' experience and ask yourself where along your members' journey you should focus first. When we undertake this work with clients, we do so by looking at your members' journey across all of the touch points they have with your brand. And so in this case, we had the opportunity to do some work with a hotelier that had a bit of an online travel booking agent, a disproportionate amount of business booked through OTAs. And so we looked at what is broken about the experience or where to focus first across the experience to get it right. And so when we do this work, we look at both human and digital means of engaging members. We look at, yes, functional ways, but also the emotive ways. And we help craft the dollars and cents at each of the right moments. Let's take a look what the study tells us on a for instance on this topic. And so for those of you in payment loyalty. Here's a look, for instance, at the role that payment programs play across a travel journey. And so by travel journey, things like booking a trip, the experience at the airport, on the plane. And so what we did was look at all of the moments across the traveler's journey to understand which are the moments that are important to get right. And so one of the things that we found was some moments are doing quite well. Things like booking a flight, paying for a flight with points, getting access to a lounge or a comfortable space while members are waiting to board the plane. Generally speaking, member satisfaction is high on only a couple of points. And so what we wanted to do was look at what are the moments to get right? What are the most important things that brands should be focusing on across that entire journey? Because we can't look at them all at the same time. We certainly need to prioritize and direct what is oftentimes a finite investment. Where do we focus first? We wanted to understand the moments that matter most, and that is that curve that is sitting behind that satisfaction curve. Those are the things that are most important.
Yeah, and so even before we put labels to it, I remember thinking, well, there's a discrepancy towards the trailing part of the journey. All of the energy and effort seems to have been spent up front, and it's kind of the inverse is what they're telling us is impactful.
Yeah, there's a good lesson here for whether you're in hospitality, whether you're in retail, whether in a quick serve restaurant. The experience that your customers and members are having with you that maybe transcends a single point in time. And so in this case, what are the moments across the entire journey that we should be focusing on? These red dots on here, for instance, are those important moments that there is a deficiency, that the program isn't ameliorating the member's experience across the travel journey. And so whether it is in getting to the airport, checking in, finding an easier way to board the plane.
Somewhere to put your bag.
There's important moments across the journey. There are some terrific technology-enabled means of solving all of these opportunities. So whether it is taking a photo of your bag before getting to the airport to make sure that you know it will fit on the overhead bin, whether it is reserving a spot on the overhead bin, whether it is micro redemptions in flight on the plane to make the experience easier, or whether it is collecting your bag as you descend and are onto your destination, or whether it is finding a local transfer option once you get there. Technology for us today, designing initiatives, and for you today, imagining how to better engage your members with your brand across their entire journey, is enabling new possibilities for all of us in a way that just wasn't possible some years ago.
So let's do the math.
Yeah, the important thing is where to focus first. And so if we were to remedy one of these important moments that matter most, what might you expect to improve? And so if we were to improve finding baggage at carousel, what could the payment program operator expect to derive from a spend, stay, and save perspective? And the dollars, the story about the ROI or the ROCSI across all of these lives behind this. Bill, let's tee up any final questions or remarks. Certainly there is, as you can tell, lots more we would love to talk about today, and certainly more content and topics that lives behind the short few topics that we shared today.
Yeah, actually, Scott, there are a number of different questions, and some of them kind of involved asking about, give you an example about loyalty programs as they relate to the sports industry. People asking about the role of gamification among rabid fans, that kind of thing. There are two or three others that are really compelling. If you want to take a stab at that one, be my guest. Mindful of time, we probably could wrap up and with some final remarks and just follow up in a written form with some of these.
Yeah, first of all, what we'd love to do is any questions that we didn't get today, we commit to getting back to participants after the call. So thank you for the questions. Sean, do you want to just tee up any closing remarks, just given people are heading off to other things?
I like that the questions were about the stuff that has been hardest to quantify, that are kind of stickier use cases around the loyalty problem, so to speak. But know that we've got an experienced lens on how to solve those problems, and we would love to chat with you further, talk more about that. Find us at any one of these events. Scott, I'd be remiss if I didn't declare that you are massively looking for people to join your team, because these questions are coming up a lot with marketers, and there's a lot more demand to answer them. So we'd be excited to do that too.
That's great.
That'll be in Chicago in a couple of weeks. We'll see you there.
That's right. Yeah, thanks, Scott. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sean. This has been fantastic. And if it weren't for the convention of a 1-hour webinar, we should have made this too, I think. There was more than enough to cover. So maybe we'll come back and do a part 2. Who knows? But thanks.
Well, if this was the start of a discussion, we'd be delighted.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for everybody who participated. Thanks again to our 2 wise guys from, in a good way, from Bond Brand Loyalty. And we'll see you all around the Wise Marketer soon. And we'll follow up with you, as Scott mentioned, with your answers to your questions. Thanks again. Everyone have a wonderful day.